Hello, my name is Garth Watson. I am a retired software developer who has returned to his first passion of organic gardening. My wife and I now run a guest house and I run a small community shared agriculture program providing veggie boxes to friends and neighbours. One of my objectives has been to provide veggie boxes all year round as well as expand my product line as much as possible. But weather, pests, etc. have prevented me from growing many of the crops I'd like to grow outside. So after experimenting with different methods of growing various products, I concluded I could fill my objectives by adding 2 grow tunnels to my current small and large greenhouses. This would allow me to grow more products, expand my season, and rotate crops grown in the greenhouses. I felt the design and materials I chose would provide me with the protection I am looking for, the durability I need, and the lowest cost. This is the end product, 2 grow tunnels, 24 feet by 14 feet. As soon as I got the first tunnel built, I was anxious to try it out. I'd already got the growth media in place as well as drip irrigation. I planted mizuna, chard, lettuce, basil, arugula, cilantro, and spinach, all of which germinated despite the current temperatures of over 100 degrees Fahrenheit within the tunnels. I was harvesting mizuna, arugula, and chard within 3 weeks of planting them. So all in all, it looks like this is going to be a success. I hope it also works in the winter. So the tunnels were 24 feet long, 14 feet wide, and about 7 feet at the apex. For each tunnel, you will need 158 feet of the 49.5-inch wide sollex paneling. This you can get online at the Greenhouse Catalogue. I'll discuss the doors and the ends in more detail later, but for the frame you will need 12 20 feet Schedule 40 1-inch PVC pipes, 3 20 feet 3/4 inch pipes, 5 cross tees, 12 tees, and 4 elbows. Then the next 2 lines are the tees you need for the end pieces, and then you will also need roofing screws, 1-inch flathead screws, metal plates, rebars, concrete, wire, PVC primer and cement, and then I use hardware cloth to cover the vent holes. You can choose your own vent material. Foundations. I'm showing the foundation here with the frame over the top of it so you can see where the foundation blocks are relative to the frame. I had to do quite a bit of leveling to get this piece of land level, and once I got it level, I made the formings and poured concrete into these blocks. I'll discuss the blocks with the next slide. So the center of these blocks are 14 feet apart and then at 4 feet intervals. And as you see at the center of the block, I hammered in a 3-foot long piece of rebar and I put those into every other block. But in every block, I put a wire tie. So I just used plastic coated wire and sunk it into the concrete block. So back to the frame. The ribs are 10 foot long. So when they're connected together and you combine the end pieces, the total width of this flat frame is 20 foot and 6 to 7 inches. The cross pieces are at 4-foot centers. So the connecting pieces are cut to about 46.5 inches in order that when you glued them together, you have the 4-foot centers. The important thing is that the sollex, which is 4 foot 1.5 inch wide, will overlap at the ribs so that when you screw them on, you're going through 2 layers of sollex into the pipe. Okay, let's go over the frame. You've got to get this right, otherwise your paneling will not fit on correctly. There are 14 10-foot ribs. When you join these together, the flat frame will end up about 20 foot 6 to 7 inches across. There are 18 cross pieces, that's 3 rows of 6, that should be cut so that you end up with 4-foot centers when everything's glued together. Thus the cut pieces will be about 46.5 inches. I'd recommend that you cut them all first before you start gluing them to make sure you've got them all exactly the same length. This is critical. When you're gluing them together, make sure you follow the primer and gluing instructions so you get the best possible bond. Then when you're actually gluing them, push them tightly together and hold them for at least 10 seconds. Otherwise, they'll slide apart and again, your spacing will not all be the same. Leave the frame for about, well, at least 2 days, but I'd recommend a week for all the bonds to cure before you attempt to push the frame into an arch. This makes the flat frame about 24 feet 1 inches long and about 20.5 feet wide. So here's me busy gluing the last few ribs together. Now we come to the exciting part, pushing the frame into place. Start by tying down the left-hand side. So put the crossbar inside the rebar and tie it down at every block. Then get 2 friends. Have one person lift up the center of the frame while the other 2 push in the right-hand side and drop it in behind the rebar. Then hold it down while you tie all the ties on every block. Then to stabilize it, put eye bolts in at least 3 of the ribs at each side. Then tie ropes across just to keep the structure square while we put the paneling on. Okay, paneling. First of all, how long? Well, I found that you need 20 foot and 7 inch for each sheet. This is because you've got 2 10-foot ribs, then the joints, then the bending process, and then your bottom crossbar all need to be covered. And I found that was, as I say, 20 foot and 7 inches. I managed to put the paneling on myself, but you know, a buddy or 2 would be great to help in this process because it is a bit difficult, especially to get the first one on. So you can see how I pulled the sheet over by sort of rolling it backwards under and then just pulling it over and placing it over the ribs. You needn't get the paneling perfectly on the frame in order to start putting the screws in. You've got a lot of flexibility as you're working with these panels. So I put it on about as well as shown in this picture, and then I start putting my screws in. So this is where I put my first roofing screw. Then I put roofing screws about every 18 inches to 2 foot around the end rib. Of course, you don't put roofing screws in the second rib at this point, but you can use some Phillips screws just to stabilize things while you get the second sheet on. You can then just overlap the second sheet over the top of the Phillips screws and then put your roofing screws through the 2 sheets. You then just repeat the process, and as shown on the picture here, you would be putting your roofing screws on the right hand of this side on the panel and on the left side you can put your Phillips screws. On the end rib you can get roofing screws all the way around. On the center ribs I just put roofing screws in as far up as I could reach, and then didn't try any acrobatics to try and get on the top. I did put Phillips screws at the top of the left side, shown here, to make everything stable. As you screw on the center ribs, you will either need a helper to hold the ribs in place while you screw them on, or you can make a little tool to do it with. I cut a branch out of the tree with a fork in it and then cut it to size so that it would fit it under the ribs and hold them in place while I screwed the panels on. Making the door. The door will be made with 3/4 inch piping with the appropriate connectors and then covered with sollex paneling. Make the door 6 foot high by about 3 foot wide, and make it with about 2 crossbars into which you will screw your fastener and handle. You will need long reach hinges that you can bolt through the paneling and the center of the pipes of both the door and the frame. Put the hinges on the door before you make the frame in order to determine the correct width for the door frame. The front frame. The front frame is made with 3/4 inch Schedule 40 PVC pipes with the appropriate connectors. It is made so that the 4 points shown here, that the 2 at the ends and the 2 at the top of the door, will fit inside the end rib, and then they'll be fastened to the rib with metal plates and Phillips screws. The bottom of the door frame I actually put about 8 inches below where the bottom of the door will be. This is so I could bury that part into the ground and stabilize the front panel. So here's a picture of the back panel. You can see the cross pipe at the bottom, and then the 2 uprights, and in the corners where I've overlapped the little piece of paneling to fill in that gap there. So let's summarize the front and back frames. For the front frame I used 3/4 inch PVC pipes and connectors. I made the door first and then made sure that the frame fit the door correctly and that the hinge would screw correctly into the frame. The piece of the frame under the door is about 8 inches below the bottom of the door, so it can be buried to stabilize the front panel. The frame is fixed to the end rib using flathead screws and nail plates. For the back frame, I used 1 inch PVC pipe along the bottom and 2 3/4 inch uprights in the center at 4 foot centers, fastened to the main frame with flathead screws and nail plates. Once you've put in the door and the center panel, you will be left with corners that are more than 4 foot wide. So put one 4 foot wide piece in and then fill this corner with a small piece that overlaps the 4 foot piece. And you can put a rivet through the center if they sort of come apart. So this is a picture of the metal plate underneath the paneling at the right hand top of the door. It also shows the framing I used for the door. It's kind of an optional extra. Vents. You can make the vents as sophisticated as you like. You may want to put fans in or whatever, but I think you would need extra framing if you wanted to put vents, special vents or fans in. I just wanted to let in air and keep out the bugs. So I decided to just make flaps that I could open and close and cover the holes with hardware cloth. So I used a 5 foot by 2 foot piece of hardware cloth and I cut it into a 2 foot and 3 foot lengths. I then cut the 2 foot lengths across the diagonal to make pieces to go in triangular vents in the front panel. So the front panel vents, I scored the hypotenuse of the vent in order that the flap would open outwards. Then I riveted the hardware cloth to the inside of the paneling. With the back vent, I scored the top of the rectangle so that it would open outwards and cut the other 3 sides, and then I riveted the hardware cloth again to the inside of the panel. This is the end product, 2 grow tunnels, 24 feet by 14 feet. So that's all there is to it. So far I've been pretty happy with the end result, and I'm looking forward to all the things I'm going to be growing in here.